So on the daf this past Shabbos we learned the Mishnah, which brings a dispute between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yosi, and the subject of the Mishnah is a case where the shechita incision is made partially beyond the upper limit of where the shechita incision is permitted in the trachea siman of the animal. Both opinions in the Mishnah agree that the upper limit is the tabas gedola. That is, along the trachea there are rings of cartilage. The uppermost ring is the tabas gedola, the great ring. It's different than the other rings because it completely encircles the trachea. This ring of cartilage. The other lower ones look like horseshoes. They don't completely encircle the trachea. It goes around most of it. So the premise in the Mishnah is that you can't make the cut above the great ring, the tabas gedola. The Mishnah discusses a case where most of the cut was done, within the allowed area. Just he was higrim. He went on an incline, and part of it went above the tabas gedola. So what is the halacha in this case? The Rabbanan say it's no good. For the Rabbanan say you have to make the whole cut in the right place. So it's not a good shechita, but Rabbi Yosi says no, it's fine. Based on the well-known principle of Rubbo kekullo. Well, the halacha deems that when we have most of the amount, that's the equivalent of doing the whole thing, that's good enough. So that applies here. Rabbi Yosi says most of the cut was made inside of the allowed area. So it's fine, the shechita is fine, we could basically ignore the rest of the cut that was made here. Now the Gemara has a discussion as follows. The Gemara, Rav and Shmuel there, they rule like Rabbi Yosi. That's not how we rule. But Rav and Shmuel say that even Rabbi Yosi agrees that, let's say he were to make the shechita lower down the trachea in one of those lower rings, those horseshoe-shaped rings of cartilage that we mentioned earlier. Rav and Shmuel say that Rabbi Yosi would agree that in this case it's not a valid shechita. Okay, why is it not a valid shechita? Because Rav and Shmuel say, when he makes the cut in the great ring, in the uppermost ring, so that's fine, because we say that the uppermost ring completely surrounds the trachea, so the halacha views that section as, all of that is trachea. That ring of cartilage, this full ring at the top of cartilage, is the trachea. It's halachically part of the trachea. So no problem, you did a shechita in that case. But if you cut through one of the lower rings, the halacha says you cut through cartilage and not through the flesh of the trachea itself. And therefore, everybody would agree that it's no good, so you would have to cut in between one of the lower rings in order for it to be valid. This is not the halacha. As Tosfos points out, we rule like Rabbi Chanina and Tignos. But either way, Rav and Shmuel are saying that according to Rabbi Yosi, it wouldn't be good if the cut was made in one of the lower rings. So there's an obvious question. Really, this is the whole point they're making here. At first glance, why should this be the halacha? Since most of these lower rings surround the trachea, so what happened to Rubbo kekullo? Most is like the whole thing. And so, just like what we said by the great ring at the top, that it's part of the trachea, so it's fine there, why don't we say the same thing in one of the lower rings? Okay, it doesn't completely surround the trachea, but Rubbo kekullo. Most of it surrounds the trachea, so that should be equal to the whole thing. So what's the problem? Why doesn't Rabbi Yosi say it's okay in this case? So it appears that the Gemara here is teaching us an important distinction when it comes to this principle of Rubbo kekullo, which is that when do we say Rubbo kekullo? What that concept means is that we have the basic ingredients. We have the template, the medium to perform the mitzvah. Just that, the Torah calls for doing a certain amount. The Torah says you really should do the whole thing, but if you do most of the whole thing, that's equal to the whole thing. That's not really what we have here. Here, it's a question of, do I have a place for shechita? Is this a place, is this a siman of the animal where I could do shechita? So the Gemara is telling us, I believe, that Rubbo Kekoulo has no comment on that question. It's not within the power of Rubbo Kekoulo to say that, abracadabra, now you have a place for shechita. Yes, I know, most of these lower rings surround the trachea, but to therefore say that, okay, it's almost there, and therefore it's as if it crossed the finish line, doesn't work to create a place for shechita. That's like, creating something from nothing. It doesn't work for that. So that's one interesting point that to think about from our sugya. Now, if you look in the Art Scroll Note 29, Art Scroll asks a very interesting question, a very basic question, which is, fine, the lower rings, you can't say the lower rings themselves are the trachea. But, okay, disregard the lower rings. What's underneath the lower rings? We know what's underneath there. It's the trachea. So as long as the shochet cuts through that, what's the problem here? Because this whole conversation should be moot. Like, what difference does it make how the halacha classifies the ring? As long as the shochet cuts through the trachea, we should be fine. And it's trachea underneath there. So it's a very good question, but and the note leaves off, it's not clear. Maybe we could suggest that the same old idea that is a big plays a big role in our sugya, Rubbo Kekoulo. Maybe the answer again lies in Rubbo Kekoulo, meaning that it seems to me, I didn't actually go and take a piece of trachea and have a good look at it, but as far as what I'm imagining, it seems clear that the cartilage, if you look at an individual part of the trachea where you have the horseshoe of cartilage going around it, I'm assuming that the cartilage takes up more volume than the flesh of the trachea. I could be wrong about that. But on that assumption, maybe the idea is that if we can't look at this all as one entity, so it's more like a mixture then, you have some cartilage, some trachea flesh. So of course scientifically it's a trachea under there, but it could be halachically, halacha just looks at one of the lower tabasas as these lower rings. Is it cartilage? I see cartilage there. If you put on your halachic glasses, you'll see just cartilage. So if you cut through that, that's not a shechita. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's the reason. As opposed to by the uppermost ring, okay, so that's something else. It totally surrounds the trachea, so it is the trachea, and so shechita there is valid. Maybe that's the answer to that question. But either way, once again, we rule like the more lenient opinion of Chanina ben Antignos, who has a different definition of where shechita is. It's more lenient, but definitely some interesting points on this fascinating topic of Rubbo Kekoulo. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.